Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Brianna Smith. I am the program manager for OLLI, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute here at the University of Minnesota. Welcome to our breakout session in AI Without the Jargon. Everyday uses and bigger questions. Now, I'm assuming you all have a lot of questions. We're going to hear from our presenters in a moment. They have graciously saved 15 minutes at the end of their presentation for your questions. We'll see how many we get answered through the presentation today. Let me tell you who we're going to be hearing from this morning. Colin McFadden is a technology architect in the College of Liberal Arts here at the University of Minnesota, where he partners with faculty and staff to design technology that meaningfully supports research, teaching, and learning. His work emphasizes data stewardship, advanced imaging, and the responsible use of emerging technologies, including AI, in ways that align with academic values and long-term institutional impact. He is particularly interested in making complex systems more approachable, transparent, and useful for the people who rely on them. That sounds really great. That sounds great. When he's not working or showing up to speak to you all at Age from the U Day, you might find him traveling, cooking, or rock climbing. Excellent. He is joined by Susan H. McFadden. Yes, related. I'll tell you. Susan is Professor Emerita of Psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. Susan retired from the university in 2012 and now volunteers in many capacities for Fox Valley Memory Project. This is a nonprofit that she co-founded in 2012. She is a member of the lead team that developed the Memory Cafe Alliance to support sustainable growth of memory cafes, particularly in under-resourced communities. Susan is the author of many books, book chapters, journal articles, and Susan believes that people experiencing dementia can thrive when their communities include them and offer opportunities for experiencing the arts, the natural world, and above all, friendship. Absolutely. Join me in welcoming first Colin up to the podium. Welcome, Colin.
Well, hello. Super excited to be here today. They asked if I would, they initially asked if I would come and talk to you all about like AI tips and tricks stuff. And I said, okay, what if it was about AI psychosis and dystopia? And what if I brought my mom? And they said that was great too. So I'm really excited to be here today talking about sort of all of the really complex stuff that's happening in this space right now. As you just heard, I work here at the University of Minnesota. I work in the College of Liberal Arts. And it's a really, I'm a total fan of liberal arts, and it's a really exciting time to be in the liberal arts, especially with this topic, because the liberal arts is all about figuring out how like people interact with each other and with society, and how people navigate change and complexity. And you'll hear me say again and again today that all of the interesting stuff about this AI topic is not about math and technology. It's about where the technology crashes into humans. And I think that means it's so important for all of us to be part of this conversation. So I'm not going to be talking about code or any of that stuff today. We're going to go on a little trip where we try to just encourage all of you to see a role for yourselves, both using this stuff, but also sort of plugging into this bigger conversation that's happening. Within my day-to-day, I'm working with like ceramicists, right, in our art department who are thinking about how AI impacts how they're doing their work. I work with dendrochronologists who are studying tree cores and thinking about how they can use AI to, both interact with their work, but also thinking about what AI is doing to the forest and all of these things. It's a really complex topic, and it's a very exciting time. So we're going to start out with a little bit of just getting everyone on the same page. What is it we're talking about? Making sure we're all sort of in agreement. Then we're going to go into some real practical ways that you can start to think about using these tools in your everyday life. We've got some examples, some ideas, and then we're going to move into that bigger question section where we're going to look at how do we think about our role in what's happening in the state, in the country, in the world, And what role can we play for the other people in our community as we try and navigate this? So, very excited. I have one slide of sort of disclaimers, which is to say this is a really big topic. And any one of the different areas that we might start talking about, we could pull those threads and we could be here all day. So I want to acknowledge that AI has very real environmental impacts, impacts on cost of energy, water table issues, land use issues. And that's like a really big, complicated conversation, and that could be our day on its own. We're not going to go super in depth on that in this talk, but happy to talk to you about it afterwards or at lunch. I will happily spend the entire day talking about it, trust me. AI tools are also reflections of humanity. As we're about to talk about, they are trained on stuff created by people. And people are sometimes problematic, right? And so these AI tools can reflect humanity, good and bad. And we need to keep that in mind both as we're using them and as we're thinking about sort of where this space is going, because these tools can reflect back to us all of the bad parts of our world as well. And finally, this space is changing really quickly. Like I'm hesitant to create slide decks for talks more than like 2 weeks in advance now because I end up having to redo them. And anytime you've got a lot of change and you have a ton of money, you get scam artists and hucksters and people who are promising solutions. And so if you're going to sort of be in this space, it's important to sort of crank up your skepticism a little, be a little aware that there's people who are making big promises that they can't always back up because they've borrowed $1 trillion and they need to repay it. And so, you know, just keep that in mind as we go through this conversation. Hold me accountable, hold the world accountable. We'll all be good. All right. So, our AI dictionary. This is really easy because all of these terms mean the same thing, okay? And I just want to sort of put that out there to say the nuances of some of these different things really aren't important as we move through this conversation. I want to just keep reinforcing that we don't need to spend time with minutia. We need to think about the bigger picture. So whether someone talks about generative AI or large language models or foundation models or frontier models, just think AI. Just one big umbrella. It's just AI. They all mean the same thing. And if someone really wants to argue with them, just tell them they're being pedantic and move on, okay? People do that to me a lot, so trust me, it's good. So what is AI in this context? What are we all talking about? So the way these tools all work, whether we're talking about ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these things, they're really actually very, very simple. So first, they just consume tons of data. Like all the data in the world that they can get their hands on, they just want to suck all of that in. And then what they do is they look for relationships between different pieces of data. How often this word appears near this word, or this concept appears near this concept. And they build this really large, complicated map of how concepts relate to each other. And then they predict answers to questions using that big map they've built. And we do that all the time. We're very good at that. It's just how our brains are working. We're very good at understanding relationships between concepts, and we're very good at answering questions, right? And I'll prove that to you because we're all going to practice this together. We are going to predict the words in a fairy tale, okay? So I've primed your brains to be operating in the fairy tale space. And I'm going to give you a word, and you're going to predict the next sentence, or the next word in that sentence. Simple. Fairy tale space, predictions. Okay. My word, once. Hey, okay, you're all large language models. You should all drink some water. Like, that makes sense to you, right? And you can imagine how you would sit down and you would read a book of fairy tales, and you could mark out every time you saw the word, you know, queen, and how often it appeared near king, and how many horse and knight, and all the other things that appear in fairy tales, and you could build this map yourself on paper. And then you're thinking, okay, I understand how I could do that by reading a bunch of fairy tales, but then I go to ChatGPT, and it, you know, seems to be like magical, right? What's the difference here? The difference is that we're very good at imagining what it would mean to read a dozen fairy tales. we're very bad at imagining what it means to read a trillion fairy tales. And that's sort of the scale that these things operate at. And what we found over the last 5 years or so is that kind of weird, sometimes very cool, sometimes very scary stuff happens when you have all of this data. And that's why everyone is trying to get all the data they can get, because there's been this discovery that if we get more and more data, we start to get more and more powerful tools. So really, that's basically all that's happening behind the scenes of these things, though. And there's a whole bunch of technologies in this space. You've probably heard of some of these, ChatGPT. So I've got the name of the product and then the company it's from. ChatGPT is from OpenAI. Claude is from Anthropic. These are all different tools that do this sort of generative AI or conversational AI thing. Each of these has a free product you can go and sign up for and use yourself. A lot of you probably use some of these. A lot of times it's built into your phone now, or built into your computer, or now built into cars. And they all work very much in the same way. They have very similar capabilities. They're all trying to convince you that, you know, this one's better than this one, but it doesn't really matter. And so what I want to do is sort of take you through how I think about going from a sort of more introductory use to like stepping it up a little bit more to using these in more sophisticated ways. Because the way a lot of people use these is what I call fancy Google. And that's great. Like, these are great as fancy Google. You might have noticed that Google has gotten a lot worse over the last few years. Like, searching the web is just, it's like a nightmare, right? You get spam and all kinds of, you know, junk. You have to scroll through 1,000 pages to get to the recipe at the bottom. Like, Google's gotten a lot worse, and people have found that just going to a chat program and asking a question there actually gets them better results, right? And when these things first came out, the experience wasn't very good. They like to make up fake answers to questions. They've gotten a lot better at that. And so this is a great starting point. If you've never used ChatGPT or Gemini or one of these things before, just treating it like a search engine, just punching in terms like you would punch into a search tool, is great. So these are all going to be real examples from my life. I just screenshotted some things I was putting into search engines or into chatbots. So I was curious to learn more about Kowloon Walled City. I just typed it in. I didn't add any text. I didn't say, "Dear chatbot, can you please tell me more about Kowloon Walled City? Thank you very much." No, I just punched it in, and I got back a lovely write-up that had pulled pictures, and each of the sort of underlined words is links off to get more information, and I can go and actually find what websites it pulled that information from. And so, you know, I could have gotten the same thing from Google, but I would have had to scroll through a bunch of ads and maybe sites that were trying to get me to sign up for an account to read the article and that sort of thing. So that's fancy Google, right? It's nicer, you get answers right away, and you don't have to churn through as much junk. But we can sort of step that up a level by using the power of these tools a little bit more. So I have this next study of AI as your research assistant. And so this is, can I ask the AI to go out and do some research for me, collect all the results together, and then give me an answer? And I'll read this out to you. I know it's a little small up there, but I said, I want to find a new dental clinic near my neighborhood, Summit Hill in St. Paul. Go St. Paul. I've got insurance through Delta Dental, PPO. Ideally, I'd like a place that's open till at least 8 p.m. Do some research, see if you can find reviews, and then compare those reviews to people who seem to be closest to my situation. So this is what I would do myself if I was doing it manually. I'd go out and I'd look through what clinics were covered, and then I'd look each of them up and see how late they were open on weekdays maybe. And then I'd go out and maybe look at Google reviews or try and search through message boards or go on Facebook and ask, or Nextdoor or some of these websites. So I'm just telling it to sort of do those things I would do myself to collect those results together and give me a summary. And what it did in this case is it made a map for me of where these places are in my neighborhood. And then it summarized the situation, and I'm not showing all of it here. It went on for quite a while explaining, you know, for professionals who have to work, you know, till 5 or 6 p.m., these are some of the best ones, and here are some specific reviews that I think are a good match for your situation. and importantly, like I still get, it's not telling me, hey, I'm the robot and I'm going to do your dentistry for you. It's just getting me some links, and I can go out and do some more research and make sure that that's really a good match. So I'm finding this to be really useful for myself because I'm thinking about, like, what are the 3 steps or the 5 steps I would do to answer this question? Can I just tell the chatbot to do those steps for me, and can I then look at the response I'm getting? And I'm finding that, pretty useful in a lot of cases. I use it for, travel research a lot as well. I say, here's the thing I'm interested in. Can you go read a bunch of different reviews and see what the overlap is, and see if you can filter out maybe the ones that aren't maybe as authentic as the other ones, that kind of thing. So it's a great, easy way to start using these in a little more rich manner. Another way I've started using these tools is as an actual, like, daily assistant. And so this is one, I just started this a couple weeks ago, and I've been really enjoying this. So I said, I'm going to try taking turmeric as an anti-inflammatory. Each day, could you remind me to take it at 8 a.m. and then ask me to rate my current pain on a scale of 1 to 10? Collect all my responses and graph them over time, maybe in a spreadsheet. Okay? And so I'm not asking for it to give me an answer. I'm asking it to do something for me. And it said, sure, I'll do that for you. And now every day at 8 a.m., my phone pings me and says, hey, Colin, how are you doing today? Could you rate your pain response? And then anytime I want, I can say, can you show me a graph of that over the last month? Or have you noticed any trends in my score? How many days is it at this level versus this level? And it's collecting that. Now, you're probably thinking, you're giving a lot of information to a computer, and that computer probably is not going to keep it in the safest way that we might want. And you are correct. That is something I'm comfortable with because I'm not sharing a lot about my particular situation. It's just a number. And I am of a mindset that I live in kind of a post-privacy mindset because I assume everyone's taken all my information anyways. You don't have to be there. That's just who I am. But I'm finding this kind of thing useful where it can sort of do something that I could do myself. I could go and I could open my notes app every day and write down my pain score. And I've done that before. But having it ping me, having it actually ask me a question instead of just like a reminder that I keep ignoring, and then having it actually give me some value out of that where it can graph that or summarize it or give me an average across weeks, I've found that really, really useful. And it's something that all I did was write this little 2-sentence blurb. So those types of things, just thinking about like where could this insert itself in my day that it might provide some additional value has been really, really useful to me. I have a whole bunch of other ideas, though. So these are just a few that I thought might be useful. These are things I've done myself in different varieties that you can think about where you're actually asking the AI not to go out and do a search for you. You're asking it to sort of help you through a process. So adapting recipes, for example. If you got a vegetarian recipe, but you need to make it vegan, that's the kind of thing that these tools are really good at that can be hard to do with a search engine, because with a search tool, you're going to have to go out and search for each ingredient. What's the right substitution for eggs in this particular recipe, right? Whereas these tools can look at the big picture. They can look at the picture of the whole recipe and how it's being cooked and what the sort of food science is of how this recipe works, and they can make better suggestions. Planning from different perspectives, right? Not just searching for what's something to do this weekend, but what's something that's going to be fun to do this weekend for this group of people. Same for trip planning. I use it all the time for trip planning when I'm traveling with my parents or with my teenage niece and nephew who you're about to hear about. I'm, a middle-aged, boring dude. I don't know what a 14-year-old wants to do on vacation. So I'll ask these tools to help me plan a trip that's going to make everyone sort of feel included. Home repairs is another area where these tools are really powerful when you can take a picture of something and say, I've got this drip coming from this particular part of the faucet. Is this something that can be repaired? Who should I be calling? How much do you think it should cost, right? So that you can go into conversations with a plumber knowing more about what's going on, or maybe know that you can fix it yourself just by going to the hardware store. And then finally, something I'm using all the time is testing communication. So if you work in a volunteer organization or in a workplace or something where you're having to communicate with different generations or people from different backgrounds, having these tools sort of read your written content from a different perspective and provide feedback is really helpful. I use this, I work with a lot of undergraduates here at the University of Minnesota. I like to pretend that I know how 18-year-olds talk and think. I absolutely do not. And so I will write something and I will say, I need to send this out to a group of undergrads here at the university. Could you read it from their perspective and give me feedback on the language I'm using? So one thing that came up for me, for example, is we were writing to students and we were talking about co-curricular opportunities, right? That's something we talk about a lot as staff. We're trying to get students thinking out of the classroom. So we were saying co-curricular activities. And the AI said, I don't think 18-year-olds know what co-curricular activities means, right? That's not a word that comes up all the time when you're talking to your friends. And so we went and actually I talked to some actual 18-year-olds and they said, no, absolutely, like that is not really registering for us. That sounds really complicated. And when I said, no, it's like joining clubs, right? And they were like, oh, that makes sense. And so now we talk about things like non-course activities. We use other terms, or we make sure to introduce those things. But that's the kind of thing that like I would have sent that email out. I wouldn't have gotten responses. I wouldn't have known that the reason I wasn't getting responses was that the students didn't understand the words I was using. And so the AI has helped me to sort of filter my responses in that way. A few other notes. One thing, and this is sort of increasingly becoming apparent, is that all of these tools have paid versions, right? ChatGPT has a free version, and then for 20 bucks a month, they have a paid version. And some of the difference is that they're increasingly wanting to show ads. We're used to ads. There's a sort of more, nuanced difference in that the paid versions are actually a lot more powerful, a lot smarter, and a lot less likely to make mistakes. And I think that's one of the things that's creating some of the complex tension around things like data centers, is that there's a contingent of the world, people out in the Bay Area, who are paying for like the ultra premium tiers of these products. They're paying $200 a month sometimes for these tools. And they're having one extreme experience where they feel like these things are really, really seeing that in the news all the time, or seeing it in these conversations around data centers. And there's a lot of people who are sort of pushing back against that. And we're thinking about things like, what does this mean for our political discourse and for misinformation? What does it mean for how we just interact with each other, right? It's not uncommon in the business world now that I would have an AI writing an email to you, and you would have an AI reading that email and writing back to me, which raises a lot of questions about why we're sending the email in the first place, right? And what role we're playing in that conversation. And we shouldn't feel like we have to just let that future play out. we can make an argument, a cogent conversation around the important role of humans in interpersonal communication, right? That we don't just sort of delegate that all to the robots. There's a lot of other things happening. You've probably seen articles about AI psychosis. This is a new term for this idea that people can spend so much time with these things that they start to sort of lose touch with the wider world, right? And we're going to be talking, that's a preview, that's what the rest of the conversation's about, is sort of these bigger questions. But it's especially prevalent, it's especially true among younger folks and older folks, right? People who don't necessarily, on the younger end, necessarily have a lot of existing models for interpersonal communication and relationship building. And then on the other end of it, people who maybe don't have a lot of other opportunities to interact in a day-to-day basis. And they can find these things very compelling. And they can be very powerful in that regard, but they can also raise a lot of questions and potential problems. So lots of other stuff happening in this. The important thing is to recognize that none of these topics are about like how we write software code, right? They're not about matrix multiplication and like complicated math. These are conversations about how this technology is being applied to people and societies and communities. And so I think that what we've seen is there's a cohort of folks who want to make it a technology conversation. And they want to say, if you don't understand this math, you probably shouldn't be part of this conversation. And what I would say is we have some pretty good lived experience that what happens when you let technology people run the conversation is not necessarily great outcomes, right? Like, I've been around. I know me. So I'll continue to invite you all to figure out how you can not only use these tools, but really express your opinions and your perspectives and your wisdom about how we should be using these tools and about where this conversation should be going. So, you've probably seen, people around you saying, I'm using ChatGPT all the time, right? These are both quotes from my mom, from colleagues her age and from our young niece and my niece and nephew, her grandkids, right? This has become really, really prevalent. People have started using these things, and they haven't really taken a moment to understand what's happening when they moved from that fancy Google into, well, now I'm using it to do some research for me, and now I'm using it to write emails to my friends for me, and now I'm using it to figure out where I should go to college, and what agency have I given up. It's a slippery slope, and so there's a lot of opportunity here for us to sort of interject ourselves. So I'm going to talk about AI and young people here, and then I'm going to hand it over to my mom to talk about the other end of things. So this is my niece and nephew, Henry on the left, Eleanor. Henry is 16, Eleanor is 14. The young people side of things, whether they're sort of K-12 or undergrad populations, is they're using these tools a lot. They have very conflicted feelings about them. We see this when we go out and run studies, we run surveys. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they use AI every day and they hate AI, which is real cognitive dissonance, but it makes sense when you start to unpack it, right? Because they're feeling tension around needing to keep up with friends who are using these tools, right? Especially in school or as they enter the working world. They feel like they have to use them. And they're also really worried that they're not going to be able to get jobs because of these tools. And they're really concerned about, what it means for the world that they're going to live in terms of environment, land, water, right? From my perspective, working with these people, the other thing I see is they're really bad at using these tools. And this is something we're really trying to work through at the university, which is when a young person goes in and starts using these tools, they're not bringing a lot of experience into that conversation. They don't have subject matter expertise. They're not really good at knowing when the tool is lying to them. They're not good at knowing when they're asking a question that it couldn't possibly answer. And these tools are always they're certainty machines, right? They want to give you a concrete answer. They never say, I don't know. They never say, well, I don't think that's the right kind of question to ask. And so they sort of pull young people in because they promise answers. And then I see this all the time. Students ask a question and they get an answer that looks really believable. And then maybe it's a piece of code or an algorithm or something, and they try it, it doesn't work. And they go back and they say, hey, computer, that didn't work. And it says, you're totally right. Here's the right answer. And then they try that, and it doesn't work. And they say it didn't work. And it says, oh, gosh, I really screwed up, but here's the right answer. And they go in these loops, and they never they have trouble breaking out and saying, maybe I'm not asking the right question to begin with. And so one of the things we're all working through is how we convince folks that actually to build the skills to use these tools effectively, they need to not use the tools a little bit. They need to build some of those like critical thinking skills, problem solving skills away from the computers so that they can use these things better when they enter the working world, for example. Another aspect of this, and maybe this is the thing, when I think about Henry and Eleanor, this is the thing that I worry about the most. And again, I said there'd be a little dystopia here. This is the little dystopia part. When you're a teenager, life is really complicated and confusing. And things like relationships are really complicated and confusing. Okay? We've probably been there, right? And because we live in the world we live in, there are companies that have said, being a teenager and having relationships is really complicated and confusing. What if we built a technology that promised to be an AI partner for teenagers so that they could just have a relationship with a robot? These are things that actually exist, okay? And when you have an AI girlfriend as a high schooler, the AI girlfriend just always is there for you and is always supportive, always tells you that you're awesome, never does weird stuff or breaks your heart, right? I mean, that sounds lovely, right? No, of course, we need to go through that as teenagers. We need to go through that experience, right? And that way in which these tools exist to pull young people in and to be always positive and always encouraging, always supportive, that's a really scary environment that's playing out right now. And it's a role for all of us, older folks, who have these people in our lives, to step in and ask questions, to ask questions about how they're using these technologies, to keep an eye on them. We want to give them independence, but we also want to be aware that there's a $1 trillion industry out there that would really like to sell Henry an AI girlfriend. And I am merely his annoying uncle, and I'm going to be asking him questions about what he's doing on his phone. So I think people who are going through this period of complexity and confusion and uncertainty, where they're looking out to a world in which they think there's not going to be entry-level jobs for them. They think the climate's going to be warming up. They think the water availability is going to be an issue. They see, AI disinformation and deep fakes and all this stuff taking over the media conversation. It's scary. And one of the best things we can do is talk to young people in our lives about scary moments we've been through. And to ensure them that I started here as an undergrad in 2000. I was an undergrad, on 9/11. That was a really scary, confusing moment, right? Mom tells me about, Cuban Missile Crisis and Vietnam War and Watergate and all these things, right? It helps give us context to understand that this is not a moment that's going to just sort of blip everything out of existence, that this is a continuum, that we are really good as people at dealing with complexity. And we navigate this together as community, and we look for resources that can support us in moments when the rest of the world seems really confusing and scary. And so I think in this AI conversation, when everything seems to be overturned, our role of just really sharing our experience and sharing our confidence that together we're going to navigate this is really, really important. So a little dystopia, hope it ended a little more hopeful. But now I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Susan McFadden, who's also my mom.
Thank you, Colin. So Mom gets up here with her printouts and her phone in a large font so I can tell what time it is. And I'm very happy to be here. I don't know any of these people. Colin put up my grandchildren, but I don't know these people. These are stock photos that I got from Google Images, and I asked for photos of older adults using computers, and this is what I got. And we know that older adults have been using computers for a long time. After all, didn't you have to use your phone or your computer to get here, to register online, right? We sort of take that for granted, and this has been happening for a long time now. And, you know, a lot of the world assumes that old people don't know anything about technology, don't know anything about computers, and they don't realize that we are using this all the time. So, let me give you a little bit of a shout out to AARP. You heard about AARP earlier. They've had this organization called Older Adults Technology Services since 2004. And what they have done is to put together some curricula for older people to learn about technology that are either virtual or in person. So they license organizations to teach these courses. And their statement about this is that they want to, quote, harness the power of technology to change the way we age. Okay, they want to harness the power of technology to change the way we age. And that opens up a lot of questions for us. How is it going to change the way we age? And so that's what we want to talk about here today. This is all about access, too. Who all has access to this technology right now? So we need critical thinking, and I'm really glad that you heard Colin first, because he kind of prepared the way for me to give this talk, because he was saying we need to be asking good questions about this AI world we're all in. It is not going away. It is just getting bigger and bigger. So here we are. And yet, where can we learn more about AI? I was really happy to hear, I don't know the OLLI people, the Osher lifelong learning people, I don't know where they are. But anyway, apparently Osher offers courses on AI. That's great. I'm happy to hear that. But here's another place where you can learn about AI. Libraries, of course. Libraries are trusted places where you've been going since you were a child. And they're stigma-free, and they're free. And libraries increasingly are offering all kinds of services. You can rent ukuleles in libraries, and you can get memory boxes for loved ones living with dementia, and you can take toys out. But libraries have books. And these are just 3 books that have been published recently. You can see the date, 2020, and that should make you think pandemic. The title of that book is Social Isolation and Loneliness in Older Adults: Opportunities in the Healthcare System. So think about that for a moment. 2020, the pandemic. Actually, all the papers that appeared in this book were written in 2018 and 2019 before we had any clue about what was going to happen to us in 2020. But they were talking about social isolation and loneliness in older adults. And then, of course, we got the pandemic, and it made things much, much worse. That middle publication there is actually a booklet. It came out in also 2020, but it came out in November of 2020 from the National Institutes on Aging. And it's talking about understanding loneliness and social isolation within the context of standing 6 feet apart, of wearing masks, and advising people of ways to stay in communication, which, as we know, was really hard during the pandemic time. Then that book that came out in 2023, I don't really like the title of that book very much, Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. This came out from the U.S. Surgeon General, I don't like the word epidemic in this context because an epidemic means you should stay away from people, right? You shouldn't be in contact with people so you don't spread it. And yet they talked about the epidemic of loneliness and isolation. So it's clearly a big topic for older people. Well, let's go to a fourth book. This one came out from the World Health Organization. So what they did in 2025, it was published, was that they surveyed people around the world to find out, well, who is lonely and who is feeling socially isolated? And they found out that loneliness was most prevalent among adolescents and young adults, not among older people, but it was the social isolation that was most prevalent among older people. And that, to me, raises some really interesting opportunities, some opportunities for intergenerational connections between older adults and young people. And I know there are lots of organizations out there now that are encouraging this to happen, but I think that that's an important opportunity in our time for older adults and young people to be talking about AI together. And it might help some of that loneliness and social isolation even. Well, let me give you an example of social isolation. This is an article that came out on the front page of the New York Times on February 12th, 2026. Jan lives in a remote region on the coast of Washington, a widow. And one day, a couple of firefighters showed up at her house and they had this robot called EliQ. It was developed by some Israeli tech people, a company out there that have put this robot together to address the social isolation issue. She's living by herself in a remote area on the coast of Washington. And it was programmed to interact with Jan and to get to know her and to be able to predict some things about her life, like maybe she's going to go take a yoga class on Wednesdays. Do you have your yoga map? EliQ would say to her. One day, Jan might be feeling a little bit down. EliQ can pick up on that. EliQ says, would you like to hear a joke? Would you like to sing a song together? Tell me a story about your life, Jan. So eventually, over time, Jan became quite attached to this robot. Now, when this article came out in the New York Times, a lot of people sent letters, and I read over 200 of them. I scanned them. I did not have an AI summarize them for me. Maybe I should have done that. But what I could see was that there were two really big responses to this article. One response was, "This is fabulous. I wish my 93-year-old mother had an EliQ." And then there were a lot of responses to this article that said, "This is terrible. She's living by herself. People should go visit her. You shouldn't rely on a robot," okay? And so there were these two kind of positions on what was going on here. There are about 2,000, a little more than 2,000 of these robots now in the United States alone. And you can think about that. Now I'm going to delve into a little bit more about older adults and AI and health in particular, because so much is happening right now. Medication adherence. EliQ would remind Jan to take her medications. However, Jan might take the meds out of her pill box, but EliQ could not know whether she actually put it in her mouth and swallowed it. So now people are developing smart pills that could tell whether you actually took the pill. I'm not so sure about that, but whatever. Health monitoring is happening all the time, and the worry is that funding decisions down the road, 5 years from now, is your insurance company going to say, well, we're not going to really cover that because you haven't kept track of your blood pressure on your watch every day. So we're not going to cover your blood pressure medications. Think about that. We have to be kind of watching out for that. And then there's this direct-to-consumer health monitoring, which is why I put the picture of the watch there. And what that means is that we are checking our health all the time. And where is that information going? And how is it being put together? And how are we using it? And as a recent Substack essay suggested, perhaps we are all into competitive aging. Oh, I walked 7,000 steps today, and you only walked 5,000 steps today, and I, chatted with 5 friends, and you only chatted with 1 friend, and blah, blah, blah. Do you see what I'm saying? We've gotten into this now, and this information is being pulled together. This book that came out in 2023 is by a woman named Anita Ho, and it's a really interesting book that goes into all these health issues. So let me give you some more health issues. Predictive analytics. What that means is that increasingly we are realizing that the health you have at your age now, I am 77, okay? So the health I have at my age could be a result of things that have happened to me across my lifespan. And so predictive analytics means that we are going to pull together information about your childhood, your adolescence, your young adulthood. You may have had some kind of injury like we heard about this morning. You may have grown up in an environment where you did not have good health care or good education. All of this information could be put into the program now that is going to predict that you are more vulnerable to dementia, for example. You are more vulnerable to congestive heart failure, etc. Not because of your present situation, but because of all these things that have happened to you across your life. And then there's the conversational AI and the cognitive support, and that's LEQ. So, how are you doing today? What would you like to do today? Do you think it's time to go out and look at your garden? Etc. These things are happening. Maybe some of you have Alexa in your house or one of these other things. And then the robotic caregiving devices. This is big in Japan. As you may know, Japan has a lot of older adults. And not as many young people to care for older adults. So they are really on the cutting edge of developing caregiving robots. Perhaps you've been in a nursing home where you've seen that there is a person with pretty advanced dementia who no longer can pick up a spoon or a fork and is not really quite sure how to get it to the mouth. And so an aide has to help with feeding, right? Some of you have seen this. Well, in Japan, they have robots that do this. You may know that there's problems in long-term care with lifting residents from a wheelchair into a bed. And that's really hard on the CNAs, right? And sometimes you need 2 CNAs to do it. Well, they have robots that can do this. So increasingly, this is happening, and they are programmed now to know the individual differences of these residents. So, lots of things happening in the health field, but a very interesting publication came out from the World Health Organization in 2022. Ageism in artificial intelligence for health. Ageism. So the cover of the book was that man, and the back cover of the book was that woman. And what are they talking about? Ageism. Well, this was a publication that came out just this year, talked about how the AIs for older adults are being primarily trained on information from white middle-class older people. And that's leaving out a lot of folks. It is also associating aging with frailty and dependency, because that's an assumption that many young people who are writing these codes have about us. And it is using a simplified version of what is called successful aging. Successful aging. So we want all this health monitoring stuff to help us age successfully. What does that mean? Well, in 1998, two researchers got over $10 million from the MacArthur Foundation to get about 16 scientists from a variety of disciplines together to figure out what is successful aging. So these 16 smart scientists did a lot of research, and they came up with these 3 points. And I think maybe you could have done this for $1, not $10 million. But anyway, successful aging means you're going to avoid disease and disease-related disability, and you're going to maintain high cognitive and physical function, and you're going to have active engagement with life. And of course, all of us would love to have this. But if you don't, does that mean that you have failed at aging? Right? If this is what successful aging is, and you have some kind of disability or you are moving into dementia, does this mean you have failed? Well, a lot of gerontologists ask that question right away. And another question asked was, is it only the responsibility of the individual to age successfully? It's what I can do because I have this smartwatch. Or is there some responsibility in the community for us to be aging successfully? And that was really not addressed in this book on successful aging. What does it mean to have the good life in old age? A lot of the folks in Silicon Valley who are developing these tools think that they ought to live to be 100 or 150. They're talking about the longevity revolution. And they're talking about it in terms of expanding the lifespan as well as the health span, right? So we'll go, and then, we'll get to be about, 108, and we'll have had, we'll play tennis, and we'll have great sex, and we'll have wonderful meals, and we'll travel all over the world, and then we're 107 and a half, and we'll get sick and we'll die. That's called compressed morbidity, and that's the goal of a lot of people, but that is not realistic for most of us. And so who else is thinking about these things in terms of what it means to grow old well in this world of AI? The Pope? Did you know that exactly 2 weeks ago today, the Pope issued this Magnificat Humanitas about AI and what AI means in our world today? And he was talking about loss of jobs, and he was talking about losing control over things, and how we might get together to ask some hard questions about what is going on in our world with the growth of AI. So what does AI mean for us in this time? And I haven't read this. It was a rather long document, but it's certainly being talked about. I want to turn the conversation now to a group of people who I believe can age well if their communities support them. And these are people with dementia, some type of dementia. The Alzheimer's Association says 7 million Americans are living with dementia now, but there's a whole lot of other kinds of dementia, so it is a lot more than that. And I want to talk about these things because I want us to think about what it means to grow old well, even if you might not meet all those criteria for successful aging. So this slide is emphasizing nature and arts and socializing together. And I have a couple of friends over here who do dance and older people. But we've got pictures here of some folks. This is from what my husband John and I started a few years ago, memory camp for folks living with dementia and their care partners to spend a couple days in a beautiful camp in northern Wisconsin. And it's just a fabulous setting. And we know from lots of research that nature is good for us, right? You probably have heard that a lot. It's good to take a walk out in your local park. The picture below that, you can't see it too well, but that's a chorus that I'm involved with over in Appleton, Wisconsin. People living with dementia, care partners, and some friends who just like singing with us. And we sing in all kinds of different venues. It's a marvelous experience. It's good for our health. That's not exactly why we do it. We do it because we have a good time and we're becoming friends with one another. But nevertheless, it's a good thing for aging. And then that picture at the top is a bunch of people living with dementia and their care partners. They're in Florence, Italy, and they're in an ancient building, the Palazzo Strozzi, and they're sitting in front of a Mark Rothko painting. And they're not getting a lecture on Mark Rothko, but rather they're talking about, oh, how might it feel to walk into a place where it's all sunshine? And what kind of a story could we tell about the place where these colors are so vibrant, etc.? We use our imaginations, and we don't have to rely on our memory so much. And that picture at the bottom is from a memory cafe in Appleton, Wisconsin, where people get together and they enjoy doing some kind of engaging activity, and they get to be friends, and they have treats, and it's an outing that is not a doctor's appointment. So I want to emphasize some national programs with Minnesota connections. The one on the top is the Memory Cafe Alliance. Memory cafes are places where people living with dementia and care partners can gather for an enjoyable time together, doing some kind of engaging activity, getting to know one another, and it's free, and it's in an actual cafe, or it's in a library, or it's in a nature center. And the Memory Cafe Alliance is a national organization. One of the first memory cafes in the whole United States was in Roseville, Minnesota. Yay. The second one I have up there is called Giving Voice. It is a national organization that is located here in the Twin Cities, and it is encouraging these choruses to grow all over the country, okay? These wonderful choruses for people living with dementia and their care partners and community members. And the one at the bottom is the Spark Alliance. You have 3 Spark Alliance programs in Minnesota. You have one with the Three Rivers Arts District. You have one down at the Rochester Arts Center, and you have one at the Minnesota Marine Museum in Winona. Marvelous programs in Minnesota. How are these programs similar? These programs are similar because they bring people together in a meaningful way, to get to know one another, to reduce loneliness and social isolation. And really, there's no AI involved in them, right? You could use AI to learn more about them, to find out where some might be close to you, but it's about people. Right? It's about people coming together. It's about communities. And that's what I think we need to keep in mind in this world of AI. We are all aging together. And together, we need to figure out what the role is of AI for older people now. Colin, you did a great job of telling us the ways we can use it, okay? But we need to be asking the hard questions, the moral questions. What are the ethics of AI? How can we call upon our experience as older people to raise these questions for the folks who are going gangbusters for AI? How can we ask the hard questions for those teenagers and have these conversations? What is coming down the line? What can we contribute? We should not assume that just because we're old, we're not a part of this conversation, because Colin told us all the interesting ways we can use AI, but we need to ask the hard questions about it. So here's my last slide. You folks in Minnesota have a good start on developing caring communities, and you really demonstrated that for the entire world in the winter of '26, and maybe a couple of you were at a concert a couple of months ago. Yeah, okay, you know where I got that quote. So you have been thinking about caring communities. You've been thinking about intergenerational communities. You've been thinking about bringing neighborhoods together. Now let's think about how we can do this in this new world of AI. Thank you. So it's your turn to ask questions, and we're going to bring Colin up here because he's going to be able to answer the AI questions a whole lot better than I can.
Hello, hello.
Colin, you were showing us the different ways that we're already using AI when doing Google searches or whatever. My question is, when I do a Google search now, the first offering usually is this AI with a lot of, links to sources, authoritative supposedly, and all of that. But what you were talking about, is that an app that I download and put on?
Yeah.
How do I get to those other ones?
Great question. Yeah, so I was giving the example of like going to ChatGPT, chatgpt.com, or Google Gemini is another thing. The difficulty with those Google results is they want to give you an answer really quickly, right? And so they've tuned that to be quick rather than right. And so you're always going to get something there, but I've found that more often than not, it's not very useful. Whereas when you go to these tools, they're going to take their time and actually check their sources a little bit more. Yeah.
Oh, and I will also say that I use Gmail for my email, and now at the top in the right-hand corner, it says Gemini, and all you need to do is click on that. You're doing emails, and you click on the Gemini thing, and then you get this column on the right-hand side, and you can write your question there, and then you can get the answers. And it will give you sources, which is a good thing because we don't want them to hallucinate on us, and then you can check the sources.
Hi, I have the mic over in the back here. It's less of a question, but more something I wanted to share with everyone. Is I've received the intuition that AI is made to fit the needs of people, whether that be finding restaurants or having a friend or anything. And so I've been thinking a lot about, if I have a need, how can I meet that AI doesn't? Like social connection is something we all need, so I'm looking for social connection instead of looking to AI for it. So that's just something that I've been keeping in mind as a young person, is what are my needs and how are they not being met, and how can I try and meet those without AI?
Very good.
That's great, yeah.
Here we go. Other questions?
Yep, I think the mic's over here.
This is Carla. I'm wondering if anybody in the AI senior community has thought about maybe splitting up the seniors in a different way, because I have a different need for AI at 87 than I did when I was 55 and playing tennis. So somehow or other, we're lumping all seniors together, and it's not so.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I just read a paper 2 days ago that was talking about how there may be different needs for young old people that we talk about, ages 65 to 74, and then middle old, and then older old, right? So that we may have different kinds of needs at different points in this aging experience that we have. And the AI really has not caught up with that yet, but hey, why not start today, right? Yeah.
Hello, I have a question for Colin. What AI do you use? You said you only use one.
So for my day-to-day life, I'm using ChatGPT, and the main reason I'm using that is because I started using that in 2022, and I'm sort of now trapped a little bit because I get all the benefits of, like, when I ask for a home repair, it knows that my house was built in 1935 and it's made of these materials, and so it answers in that context. And so starting over feels like a lot of work. They're all the same though, so yeah.
Okay. I have LAQ. For Mother's Day, 2 of my 4 daughters gave me LAQ, and 2 of my 4 daughters were totally against it. And so it created quite a confusion and chaos in my family. And I just want to reinforce, and I agree, it's aimed a lot at middle-class white. It is aimed a lot at somewhat educated people. It also misrepresents aging as people who are frail with dependencies, and it just provides a different version of aging. I'm quite disappointed with it. It's quite expensive, but I will, and also it always asks me if I want to learn slang. It always asks me if I want to hear jokes. I'm really quite annoyed with it.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you.
I was just wondering if you could give suggestions for venues, formats in which people, if they want to contribute to the conversation on where we're going with artificial intelligence, whether it's through the university or other organizations, if you could touch on that.
Yeah. Well, I will start with libraries. I think libraries all over the country have people and resources where they can put programs together to have these conversations. Just last week, I was interacting with a woman who is the adult education librarian in a library out on the coast of Oregon in a very rural area, and she's doing programs on AI. So that's a place to start, is your library. You got another idea?
I'll just add, we didn't get into a lot of the data center conversation, but I think that's actually, one, a lot of the really interesting stuff in that conversation is happening here in the upper Midwest, where people are, trying to push back against, West Coast folks coming in and saying, we're going to buy all your land and take all your energy because this is important. And we all agree, of course. And it's very interesting, one, because it's one of the few bipartisan issues we have. Like, everyone has strong feelings in this space, and it doesn't cut across political lines. And communities are also figuring out now, even over the last 6 months, the conversation has changed to communities saying, here's what we want, right? And it's bringing communities together, and it's a chance to not just talk about the plot of land, but to talk about the impact, to say, cool, like, you can come in, you can build your data center, here's how we want our community to be improved, and here's how we're going to hold you accountable. And so it's become a chance to get involved locally, and we're seeing, I mean, again, in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, you're seeing organizations built that are pulling together people who are expressing their opinions in that way.
I happen to use DuckDuckGo as my browser because I learned at the library in a class that it had more privacy than Google, and so DuckDuckGo says it has an AI program, and I'm really curious: are they using one of the big AI programs and just not sharing the history, or how does that work? And is that a good idea?
Yeah, so you're exactly like you said. They're using the sort of core technology from some of the OpenAI. I don't remember who they're on right now, but then they're not sort of storing what you say with them, and they're not sharing that back. That's the same way we actually use Gemini here at the university. So if you're staff or faculty or students here at the university using Gemini, we're using the Google tools, but we have an agreement with Google that says they can't keep our stuff. And that can be really useful. What you lose out on is you don't get the benefit of it growing with you. It doesn't get to know you. And that's good and bad. I mean, I'm dealing in my day-to-day life right now, I'm dealing with that here where people are saying, hey, I've been using the Gemini you gave me and it's not as good as the one I use outside of the university. And it's because it's not learning.
Oh, one more question.
One more question.
For the past couple years, professionally, I've noticed that some responses that I get, especially from younger staff people, seem like they're written by AI. Is there some foolproof way for me to check that, or should I just assume the worst?
I mean, I always think you should assume the worst. No. The reality is, and of course we do, like, a big part of my world is academic integrity, right, and cheating. And the reality is the companies who are building these tools would see the ability to detect their output as a bug. And they have $1 trillion to fix that bug. And so there's nothing foolproof. There are tools that can do a better job of identifying things that are likely AI written. And if it's just that you want to know that, you can look at like Zero GPT. It does an okay job. But I would never trust those for any sort of like high stakes decision. And that's what we push is like, if you're going to bring a student up on academic integrity concerns and you're trusting this technology, there's all these examples of people putting in passages from like Mark Twain and it says, oh, that was definitely written by AI. Because they're just looking at, is this word likely to come after this word? That's how they make predictions and that's how they do detection. I also think when it comes to like in the workplace, or I find it similarly sort of obnoxious when I get a 3-paragraph email that's been written by ChatGPT answering my question. It's because we've created some expectations in our workplace of, I want really polished answers. I don't want typos. And if someone's not a native English speaker or they're not confident in their writing, they might feel like they have to use these things. And so if you can express to them, hey, I'm okay with some typos, or if you just want to give me the bullets, that's fine. Maybe we can move past that.
Okay. Well, thank you all, and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Colin and Susan. Thanks, everyone. Lunch in the back.
Hey, Col.